The New Level Cap podcast is a show about fun, friends, game design, and all things otherwise. Your hosts are Marco DeSantos and Brad Telton of Level 99 Games. I'm Chris Solis, your producer, and without further ado, please enjoy the show.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to the New Level Cap podcast, a service provided to you by Level 99 Games at no expense.
Yes.
I am your host, Brad Telton, and with me is my splendiferous remote co-host, Marco DeSantos.
Also known as the Mechanic Critic. Yes. It costs you nothing to partake in this service except for your soul.
Okay, so we are here, we are back, and we have another episode for today. We've got a great docket today. Marco and I are really excited to talk about this topic, which is games as a service / platform. Why don't we jump right in?
All right, let's jump right in. So games as a service. This might be a concept that not a lot of people understand, especially since we're coming from the board gaming realm, and it's kind of hard to imagine what games as a service are like. But if you've seen any game in modern times, it's probably already a service, or at least the developer is trying to turn them into a service. So what is games as a service? I feel like it's a relatively quote-unquote modern way of looking at games where developers provide continued support to a game with an expectation that the player will continue to play and an expectation that the developer will continue to update. Essentially, it's kind of like thinking about YouTube or things like Netflix. Like, these things are services, but instead of movies and or videos, it's video games, you know?
Yeah. And, to make a few points, like, we're not talking about like the actual a service of games, a service as games, like say like the old GameFly game rentals or the cloud virtual consoles that you can now like log in and play on a remote PS2 somewhere. All the old PS2 games, those are something a little bit different. We're talking about the games themselves being the service that a developer is providing to you.
Yes. Directly to you. It's a service of fun, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it. But yeah, like one thing that I never realized is that when Brad and I were talking about this, is that Brad actually compares them to a thing that have been technically a service for eons, you know?
Yeah, so I think that there's some crossover here to, or at least a similarity to pro sports, right? You never really own basketball, right, or soccer. These basketball and soccer are provided to you by these professional organizations that curate the sport, that promote the sport, and that provide continuous new content related to the sport for you to consume. So you might consider that that the pro sports leagues are also somewhat of a service.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think this is an example that like really broke open this topic, because essentially think everything about basketball and what surrounds about basketball, and then replace basketball with a video game is essentially the topic we're talking about right now, right? It's
to some extent. There's similarities. I just want to say there's similarities, right?
Oh yeah.
Like with a video game, you really get to play the game. Maybe a closer example might be coin-op arcades, and that's going a little bit far. But if you consider maybe some of the more modern arcades where you get like trading cards out of the arcade, or the arcade saves your progress and you can continue on other machines in other arcades, those kind of games are also very close to services.
Yeah. Like modern Tekken, or maybe old school Mushy King, right?
Yeah, or Initial D. That's what we played back in my arcade.
Initial D. Did they play the Euro beats whenever you played that game?
Yeah.
Okay.
We had those Euro beats on repeat in our cars, all of us,
Oh.
on our burned CDs.
Oh man! Remember when you used to use?
It was a golden age.
Oh my gosh! Remember when you had to use Nero in order to burn CDs? Oh my.
Yep.
Oh my gosh! It took me forever to understand why that program was called Nero, and I'm so mad that it took me forever to realize why it was called Nero. To be fair, I didn't know a lot about like ancient Greece, I guess. All right. So what are some examples? Maybe it would be more clear if we give some modern or some old school video game, board game examples of this. So I want to go for one. Let's go back to 1990 something, where MMOs were a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
Subscription-based MMOs, subscription-based games, technically, are probably the grandfather, or quote-unquote, the OG of this in video games, right? So players have
and this is a great category because all MMOs are games as a service. Right? If they unplug the server, then the game no longer exists. You can't play it anymore.
And
so this is a perfect example of something that can only be a game as a service.
In the end, right? Like, you have to pay the developer continually in order to partake in the service, and if you don't, then you don't. It's kind of like that's why I said Netflix, right? The moment you stop paying Netflix, you don't get to watch videos anymore. And in the same much in the same way, if you stop paying for your WoW subscription, you stop playing WoW. and
this is and it's so you're really buying the game time. You're buying that server access. Yeah. Some games have flipped this on their head. If you look at games like Guild Wars 2 or Overwatch or what's another good one, like I think Minecraft nowadays, they provide the game at a one-time fee, but then the service is part of that product that you buy. So I'm getting the game, but I can only use the game in conjunction with the service. But the service is free because I bought the game. So that model is a bit more modern, and Guild Wars really pioneered it.
It's like a one-time subscription fee.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the development of the game is funded by new people jumping on by the rate of sale of these one-time subscription fees.
All right. So we're talking about these kinds of like MMOs, pseudo MMOs. Let's talk about board gaming space. Like, what would be a board game, quote unquote, translation of a subscription based service that you have to continuously pay in order to access new content?
Yeah. So an analog to like that virtual console cloud platform would be your gaming cafes, right? I buy some time or I buy a coffee in this cafe, and that gives me access to the whole library. And that's sort of a service providing game. So it's not quite what we're talking about, but it's a step closer. Obviously, with a board game, you have to hand somebody a physical thing, and they can't, and they can always use that thing because they always own it. So I would say the best or closest analog to games as a service would probably be collectible card games. So a game like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh! Those games only exist they only work because there's a central organized play authority that is encouraging you to play events, to come out, to bring your deck, to build decks. If the organized play circuits didn't exist for these games, a large portion of the game would disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And so those organized play groups are a service provided by the publisher to you as part of your purchase of those card packs. So every time I buy a booster, I'm kind of helping to keep the DCI around so that I can play more Magic events.
I think this is like the tenuous ground, right? Because the big difference here is, even if Wizards or Konami decided to stop supporting Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic, your card still exists. So imagine what would happen if the moment Wizards and Konami decided to stop supporting these games, your cards just disappeared in thin air. That's kind of like
that's the video game analog.
Yeah, that's the video game analog, right? Like,
and I think this is one reason people like the physical cards, because they know that they retain their property even if the service ends. Yeah. Like, you may not be able to find opponents, but I will always own my own collection, at least.
You know, this is why there's a new age thing where people are using blockchains for video games, so that you technically always own your virtual items even if the service gets shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
I guess they could turn it into a blockchain currency at the end of the day.
Yeah. And so that's essentially what they do for some games now. So I can't think of any examples specifically that do it really well, but some games are like that now, where the in-game items are actually represented by a blockchain, so that even if the service dies, you still own the item. I don't know why you would want that, but that's a thing, right?
No, it's a good way to go. It's nice that there's something there.
Yeah.
It would be, I mean, it'd be even cooler if you actually own something, or if a server is made public so that anybody can run it. Those kind of things.
Ooh.
But what can you do with these digital products? Another thing that's kind of close is the living card games, right? Where I am, as a publisher, putting out new content 2, 3, 4, maybe every month of the year. And the players can continually consume that content and expand their game. If I cease the service, then the meta ceases. So the service that I'm really providing there is continuous updates to the meta through the publishing of new cards.
Yeah. Can we say LCG on this podcast?
We can say LCG. We can say whatever, right? We can't print the word LCG on a pin and sell it to somebody, but we can say it.
Okay. So if we had to make our own LCG, what would we call it? The Level 99 Games LCG. Sorry, we can't call it that, but like...
Yeah, an L99 CG.
L99, Level 99 card game.
Yeah.
How about a Living 99 card game? Can you do that?
Living 99 card game? About, this reminds me of the 2P CG from Upper Deck.
What does 2PC stand?
Two-player card game? I don't think it ever took off, but that was their branding for a short time. And I just remember seeing one year at Gamma, like 2P CG with a little trademark at the end, and I just face palmed so hard. Like why not call it like CGDNS? Like original card game, do not steal.
I like it
as your acronym.
Yeah, no, do that. So Level 99 Games OCGDNS or some original card game, do not steal. Deal. We should probably do a Millennium Blades game. That's that. Oh my god, it would be amazing. Yeah. It would be amazing. All right. So there's that. But I think when people think about games as a service, the most common thing that people think about right now, at least, are free-to-play games, right? Like games that are continuously updated, continuously release content, but content is gated behind paywalls, behind microtransactions. So
right, so the developers can afford to continue making this content. So it's kind of a pay-as-you-go game.
I like that, pay-as-you-go.
These are your free-to-play games. You know, your Mobajis, your Fire Emblem Heroes, your Neopets, your League of Legends. It's like Battlecon Online.
No, Battlecon Online. Yeah, definitely. Like, people need to buy the products in order for us to continue to make new products outside of those products, right? And technically it is a service, right? Because the content they provide has to be good enough for you to want to buy it, and you have to keep buying it for them to be able to continue to give you more products.
Well, and part of it is, too, that the service is already being provided in terms of the game. So the content stream is another service, but it's a way to make both services profitable, because nobody's paying for the access service. They're only paying for the content blobs.
Yeah.
And so the hope is that the few people who buy content blobs will be paying for the server cost for everyone and the update cost for everyone that plays the game.
Yeah. I think you're right in saying that, right? Because technically no one has to pay for gameplay updates, visual, like, you know, balance updates, bug fixing, servers.
Right, but that's what actually costs the money. A new skin for your favorite champion in League doesn't actually cost that much to make. It's the maintenance of the game that's expensive.
Oh, I've never really thought about it this way, but you're absolutely correct.
So a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're one of these pay-to-win players," but those pay-to-win players are the ones that are actually keeping the game open for you, right? They're the customers.
Yeah.
You're not if you're not paying to play, you're not the customer. You're the product.
Oh my gosh, it's like Facebook. No,
I mean it's true. Like that's the adage in business. Like, if you're not the customer, you're the product, right?
Yeah.
So if you're like, I'm either buying into this service for this experience, or I am being provided to somebody who is paying as a opponent to make their experience real.
Oh my gosh, Brad, you've ruined my worldview. I am but a commodity.
When you play a free to play game, you kind of make yourself a commodity.
Blade Runner 2017. All right. Okay, so here's the last one, right? Something that might induce a lot of chagrin in many people is most modern games that come out right now technically are trying to be shoehorned as services, even if they probably shouldn't be. You know what I mean?
You're talking about like the DLC, season pass, online play pass, those kind of things?
Yes, exactly. So stuff like fighting games, which in your mind shouldn't be games as a service, or shouldn't be something you have to continuously pay for in order to gain access to the features. And yet you have stuff like Street Fighter V, where like literally everything isn't unlocked unless you pay for everything, right? Like you pay $60 for a game and then have to pay more dollars just to get characters that were already made on day one, and they just wanted to stagger release to make more money.
If Street Fighter V had the same strategy as Overwatch, I think it'd be a much better game. Like, pay $60, get all the characters forever, and the people that want to spend extra money on those loot boxes can, and the rest of us can grind them as we, gain online levels. But the game is complete. You buy the game and you're in. And I can play it as much as I want, and I can play the new content as much as I want. Going with a like League of Legends style model where every piece of content has to be paid for separately is I think pulling away from that game. Of course, it's very hard to go from that bite-sized content model to a complete game model once you've started. So it may just be something we have to wait for Street Fighter 6. Personally, I don't think Capcom had the confidence to do it. I think that maybe they would have considered it, but they probably felt like the Street Fighter audience was so small that they had to take them for all they were worth.
Yeah, but we all know that technically this isn't true, right? Like,
I mean, it may be true. We don't really know. Like, the fighting game community is loud, and I feel like they have a good number of members. They have their own community, but it is a saturated space, and it is hard to get everybody on board one specific game.
I mean, that's not incorrect. But there was a game that came out, and it was a free-to-play service that just gave you costumes and stuff. And it was a fighting game. Ever played Rising Thunder?
I've heard of Rising Thunder. This is the one with the robots, right?
Yeah, it's the one with the robots. And people loved that game, right? And there was a lot of people playing it. And in fact, it was just a big...
Where is it now?
It's closed because Tencent bought it. And they had the development studio working on a new game. That's basically going to be like Rising Thunder 2, Electric Boogaloo, maybe League of Legends. League of Legends, the fighting game, right?
Well, League of Legends fighting game would be cool. Well, let's hope they do the right business model that's friendly to the customers and to their own staff. What's smart for the customers is often smart for the business. It's pretty rare that those are disconnected.
Yeah, I hope game development as a whole realizes that, because currently what we're doing is we ring all the customers for what they're worth,
Yeah, it's and a lot of these games as services, or trying to convert a game to a service because a service can be lucrative, is it puts the developers and the customers at an adversarial relationship where players are trying to get as much as possible out of the game and developers are trying to give as little as possible or to take as much as possible from the players.
Yeah.
And so we're almost fighting with each other and it's adversarial. But we could talk about the pitfalls in the mini pitfalls after our short break.
All right, so let's go to the break and snap some necks. Visit Level 99 Games at PAX East. We'll be featuring Street Fighter Exceed at the show. Come to Tabletop Booth 11 to learn how to play and leave with a free Ryu vs. Ken demo deck. See you there.
Oh, Marco, my neck!
Brad, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to smash yours.
Well, welcome back, everyone. Here we are. More games as a service. And we're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages.
All right, Brad, before we go to the string of negativity that will come near the end, let's talk about some advantages first. Let's start. Let's
talk about the warm, fuzzy feelings that paying for a game forever creates.
Yeah, a spoonful of sugar will make the medicine go down.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start off with some good stuff. So, ideally, in an ideal world, this kind of model for a game is good for everyone. Players will be able to play a game that they enjoy, and the game that they enjoy will continuously be updated, balanced, and will always feel fresh and new because there's always new content. On the developer side, they're able to make more money because they're able to produce new content that can earn them money without having to make an entirely new game from scratch. It's easier this way because they just have to extend a game that currently exists rather than create an entirely new game from nothing, right?
It also allows you to offset the costs associated with maintenance of a game. Right, like these games, part of the reason that a lot of these games are services, at least the ones that deserve to be services, is because they do require constant maintenance. And unlike a game like, say, Mega Man 2, where once I buy it, I've bought it and Capcom's job is done, a game like Guild Wars or World of Warcraft or Fire Emblem Heroes really needs constant updates, and the server has to be maintained, and the ladders have to be updated, and the online features and events have to be run. So all of these things do require an input, and so making the game, bill as a service is a good way to cover those costs.
And in a way, it makes it easier for everyone because you can just build on the popularity of previous games in order to sell or market the new content that you're making. So again, this was this way for BattleCon, right? Like we didn't necessarily make an entirely new game from scratch, right? We didn't change the core system. We just technically released more characters and gameplay updates. So in an essence...
You mean you're talking about with the tabletop game?
Yeah, right? BattleCon, the tabletop game, right?
The system exists, and then we continue to develop content for that system and just package the content and sell it. And so in that sense, there is some of that same service model. Obviously, it's not a service because you don't have to pay us continually. We don't have to do any continual maintenance on the game, but we are maintaining the rules. And in that sense, the service we provide for a game like BattleCon is very similar to the service that the NBA provides for a game like basketball.
Yeah. Okay, wait. You pronounced basketball really weird there. It's not,
really?
You didn't say basketball. You said basketball. It's really fun. Anyway.
It's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm weird. Okay. I love languages and pronunciation.
You talk funny too, Marco.
I mean, yeah, that's true because I'm Filipino. Okay. Gosh. All right. No, but
I'm from North Carolina. You're saying it wrong.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But you're not British, so technically we're both saying it wrong.
Basketball's definitely an American word.
But English is a British language.
Don't split hairs with me, Mark. It's like a service where Marco continually criticizes the way that you speak once a week forever, and you pay for it, right?
You pay for it. Oh my god. No, I'm sorry, Brad. I love you. Okay, God.
Well, I think one thing maybe we haven't talked about is that when players are receiving a service, there is an impetus to participate in that service. When you buy a gym membership, you want to go to the gym to get your money's worth. When you buy a World of Warcraft membership, you want to play World of Warcraft. And so it creates a deeper player involvement. And I think some players may underestimate how important it is, that involvement towards their enjoyment of the game. That a game continues to bring you back because you're invested in it.
This is the onset of what many people would like to call the lifestyle game. Or as sports people say, ball is life,
I think that's rappers that say that.
Really?
But yes, I know what you're talking about, right? Like, some people just play Overwatch, and it's the only game they play.
Yeah. And when they're not playing Overwatch, you know what they're doing?
Thinking about it.
Watching it, reading guides, streaming, right? Like it becomes their entire life. The same way basketball becomes the life for some people, right? Who want to get into varsity, who want to...
Yeah.
And
I think it may be a little cruel to say their entire life, but it becomes their game. Like, this is not... I don't play video games. I play Overwatch, right? Or I play Smash Brothers. Or I play Street Fighter. I don't play video games.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's really cool. You have to have a game this big that can be developed this long to reach that status, right? Nobody says, well, I play Final Fantasy VII. Like, maybe there's a few people.
Speedrunners.
But those games are inherently finite. Whereas with an infinite game, it really can become your hobby is the game, not games as a whole.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure, right? Because of the continued updates and the continued stream of content, there's just no end to it. So you could technically play one game forever.
And in our tabletop sphere, how many people just play Magic or just play Pokemon and don't play any other tabletop game or any other card game? Those games are the platform for them. Those games are the hobby.
So these are the cool things that you can do with games as a service or games as a platform, right? They can provide so many advantages and they can be so cool in so many ways. But Brad, let's talk about how they can be so cruel in so many ways.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of negatives and a lot of pitfalls. And I think pitfalls are a good word, because you don't have to fall into these traps, but it is very easy.
Very, very, very,
Right?
very, very, very easy.
So, first of all, I'd like to talk about it from a developer perspective, because a lifestyle game and a game as a service requires a developer to stay on board forever. To continue maintenance, even at the very minimum, is going to require somebody's time. To continue to develop content is going to require a lot of people's time. And creative people generally don't like to work on the same thing forever. They want to try new things, stretch their wings, move on to new stuff. And so you get in a situation where either the developers are tired of the game and they're going to put out subpar content, or the developers leave and a new team takes over, and that new team has to either, continue the content and do okay, drop the content and not do as okay, or take the game in a new direction that's their direction and really own it. And sometimes you see a game really come into its own after a new team takes hold. And so there is a potential advantage here, but those are a lot rarer than the games that just die for lack of support.
It's very much true, right? And I think this is a problem with games in general, and I don't know how games will ever overcome this. But like when people talk about esports, like how long do video games even last that they can become an esport? Like basketball has lasted for eons at this point.
Well, eons, decades at this point. Soccer's been around eons. But yeah, a game has to have a long life, and it's difficult for games to have such a long life in our information age.
Yeah.
Things move very quickly. And if the game is unsuccessful on a large scale, if it doesn't reach critical mass, then the players that did get heavily invested, the game will be spoiled for them because it does have to be shuttered. I can't continue to maintain the service if it's not making enough money, so all of the true believers out there, sorry, but your game is gone.
And this is a really interesting point that we have to bring up. This has a lot to do with video gaming history, because when we get into these kinds of games, the big thing about them is that for many MMOs, the moment the publisher decides to stop supporting the service or stop providing the service, the game disappears.
It's just dead.
Yeah, I mean, not just even dead, right? Like, because a dead game would be like a game where you log in and no one's online. I'm even talking about like just the fact that you can no longer log in, period, right? You can't actually play the game anymore. And that's weird, because a lot of games have probably disappeared into the ether and nobody can play them anymore.
It's true. And the culture and the experiences that those games generated really are lost. Like, if I have a theoretical kid, I could show them Final Fantasy VII, and I could show them Chrono Trigger, and I could show them Mega Man 4, and I could say, this is my childhood, these are the games that we played, these are the experiences and the stories we told. But I could never show them Final Fantasy XI because the game is gone.
Even if I, 30 years from now, had a theoretical Marco Jr., and I was like, hey, Daniel Jr. or whatever, here's the game I played when I was a kid. Even if League of Legends is still alive 30 years from now, the League of Legends that my kid would see is nowhere near the League of Legends I played when I was a kid. So,
yeah, which is very different than, say, like the basketball that my dad played, right? Which is essentially the same as ours.
Yeah, I mean, some small rules will change, but
a couple rules changes, but yeah. So it's a very different thing, and it's something that's wrapped up in our information age in a way that may be inseparable from the flow of time.
Yeah, I think video games are just more susceptible to this, because video games tend to, like, adding new content, mechanics, and stuff in video games tends to be the first thing people think about. And in basketball, that's really hard. Like, if basketball were
the new players are the new content, right? The game is constantly evolving because players are retiring and new players are coming out. The trouble is that an Overwatch character or a League character never need retire.
Yeah, exactly. Right? That's my point.
But if those characters did retire, then the game could continue to evolve in a way that's not just new stuff, right?
Brad. Oh no, I just realized something. Is this why card rotations exist in Magic?
Yeah, it is. This is why card rotations exist. It's to keep the sport fresh, right?
Oh, okay. So what you're saying is that players retiring is like card rotation in Magic.
Well, imagine if Babe Ruth was still playing baseball today, right? Like, there would be if all the old players continued to play forever and ever and ever, the game it'd be unplayable. New people couldn't get into it, and you would have to know the whole history of the sport. So it's not interesting to be stagnant, to have the same characters on the stage forever.
That's true. Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, imagine if Michael Jordan was always in basketball, or Efren Bata Reyes was always in billiards. There'd be no contest. There'd be absolutely no
But
contest.
the system remains. Like, Magic the Gathering is still the same game. The cards are different. And the old cards still exist, and you can collect them, and you can enjoy the history of the game. But people don't seriously play with them. I think that, much like life, the experience is the moment with these service games. And one of the real pitfalls that you can fall into is that experience will always inherently feel complete, because either the game will never end, there's always more stuff, or the game will end and we won't get to, because there's no true ending. There's just, we had to shutter the service.
There's a big difference between spending 30, 40 hours in a JRPG and finishing it, like finishing Persona 5, and a game like WoW, where there's no such thing as an end.
Months, and you've never really reached the end of the game. There's no closure to it.
There's no closure, right? Like, there's no story that you followed and then reached a cathartic ending. What happened is, in WoW, you beat a dungeon, got some items, beat more dungeons, got more items. Oh, I beat everything. Time to wait for the next expansion to get more items, right? Like,
yeah.
Like,
and that's why I say, like, the game is in the experience and not in the conclusion, like it is in a lot of our games.
Yeah.
And
at the end of the
players, if you understand that, it's fine.
Brad, practices that abuse the players and are not consumer friendly. So I'll just list them down. Day one DLCs, season passes that are not supposed to be season passes, loot boxes, and, Skinner boxes, right? Like, all the things that you hate about modern games, they're because the games try to be a service.
Now, I will say there's an inherent joy to opening loot boxes. That's kind of the foundation of Millennium Blades. People like to get random cool stuff. Day one DLC, it's okay. We do day one DLC. I mean, when we launch an expansion as part of our base game, like with Argent or with Imperial. So I why do people look at ours different than when they look at a video game? I don't know. I think that probably the bigger problem here is that these games as a service, when we make them free or we make them low cost or we allow people to play without playing, we create a sense of entitlement that players deserve all the content of the game without paying for it.
Yeah.
If you take a game like, say, like Dark Souls, to mention our favorite game on this podcast, and you look at the DLC for that game, it's basically another game. Like, it's half again as long as the game.
Mm-hmm.
And if that wasn't DLC, the game would have to be a $90 game. But by making a $60 game with a $30 DLC, we can really produce the game that is $60 for the people that want the core experience and $90 for the true believers. And we don't have to force everybody to get one part and everybody to get the other. But it's not a service. It's done in a tasteful way. And I guess I got on a bit of a tangent there. but these elements on their own are not bad. It's the use of these elements by publishers that are trying to take as much as they can from the players that makes them bad.
Yeah. Again, these are tools. These are all tools. These
are tools for an experience. But when a poorly thought through business model like free to play causes you to need that funding and to do whatever it takes to get it, you start to fall into some of these traps of player unfriendly practices.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, Brad, why do we have so many negatives? Why did we rant for like the last 15 minutes about all the bad stuff about this tool? Because again, games as a service are technically a tool for you to use in order to maintain your game, provide content to your players. They can be so good, but why did we talk about so much bad?
Maybe we just don't like them.
Do we just concede? Like, I don't like them.
I mean, they're tough. It's tough. It's tough to do well. The game as a service requires a lot of well thought out business acumen, I think, and I believe that it's my belief that a lot of studios and a lot of developers are not business people. They're developers and creatives first, and then they think about the business side later. And creating a system that... I don't think anybody wants to create a system that's abusive to customers or that's antagonistic to customers, like we've talked about it. But when you build your game and then you think about, oh, how are we going to make money on this? That it's very easy to fall into that trap.
You just default into whatever everybody else is doing, essentially.
Whatever you have to do to keep the game running. My side may be a bit sympathetic. I mean, that may not be as that may not tell the full story. But that's kind of how I feel that no true developer wants to create this kind of a relationship where they are disappointing their customers. It's not good business, and it doesn't engender your future games to do well either.
So I'm starting to think, what happens when somebody who is a business person develops a game that's meant to have a healthy economy?
Yeah, I mean, you probably get a game like Overwatch or Hearthstone, right?
Yeah, I guess. And you know what? Those are some of the world's most popular games in this generation for a reason, right?
Yeah, and they're good if you want a free-to-play. They're good if you want to pay-to-play. They work. But they also have a huge critical mass behind them. And any company, if you just look at what Blizzard did and said, oh, well, I'll do that too, it may not work for you. And I think that's a trap that a lot of people fall into too. Everybody wants to make an MMO with the same model as World of Warcraft, but it doesn't work for them the way it worked for Blizzard because they're in a different business situation or with a different market or with a different genre.
Because they're not Blizzard. That's the real thing.
I mean, that's the easy way to say it, but it's a more complex picture than that, right? There's a lot of differences. It's not just the fact that you don't have a brand name. I think if Marvel decided to make an MMO in the exact same style as World of Warcraft, they probably wouldn't do as well as World of Warcraft.
Yeah, no, but sorry, what I meant is that they're not Blizzard, and they don't have Blizzard's audience. They don't have Blizzard's acumen. They don't have Blizzard's skill set, right? Is what I'm saying, right?
So you have to, I think it's worthy to point out those specific things and not just say, oh, well, you're not Blizzard.
Yeah. Okay, right? That's fair, right? It's not just the name. It's all of the things that make Blizzard Blizzard is why those games work that way, right? You have to be able to understand your own skill set and limitations and not just copy whatever Blizzard did because you're not Blizzard, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's really the whole takeaway. This is a genre that is still developing from the business side, that we're still learning a lot about, and we will probably get somewhere really cool with these kind of games eventually. We're seeing a few outstanding titles that really do this well, and it works for their specific market, but it may not be exportable to the greater market. And I think developers just need to be smart about smart and clear about what is the service and what is the game.
Because I think the muddied lines between those two can cause some of the problems that we've listed before, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It might even go as far to say all of the problems come from that not being clear.
Oh, you're not incorrect. Because at the end of the day, one of the big problems might be the fact that the developers keep looking at it as the players pay for the service, when in reality, they just want to play the game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, players just want to buy a game and have it and play it for a short time and then leave, which is kind of why the Guild Wars 2 Overwatch model, pay once, and play and own forever model kind of works. But anyway, we could go on and on about this sort of thing, but I think we've said most of the good points. If you have a cool opinion at home, why don't you leave us a comment and tell us what you think is at the root of the problems that we've mentioned and what the future of games as a service holds.
Yeah, and, we've listed a lot of negatives, and I just want to make it very clear that we want the discussion in the comment section down below to remain civil. This is a very hot topic in game design and gaming space in general, and I know a lot of people can feel very passionate about it, but at the end of the day, remember that the thing we talked about is a tool. It is not inherently bad or inherently evil. Any of the things we talked about here are simply misused a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think anybody who has played and enjoyed a game as a service knows that they can be done well. But anyway, I've been your host, Brad Talton, and with me, my splendiferous co-host,
Marco DeSantos, also known as Mechanic Critic. And if you like this podcast, please give us a comment, give us a like, and share it with a friend. And if you hated this podcast, share it with your dearest, most vile enemy. Without much else to say, thank you so much for listening, and thank you, World of Indians. Thank you, and good night.
And as always, happy gaming.
The new Level Cap podcast is produced by Level 99 Games. Join us next Wednesday for more design talk and shenanigans. Thank you for listening.